Robert Spencer here for Jihad Watch, a program of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and for the Center for Security Policy, with some important information about the war against the freedom of speech, which may be the most important war in which we are embroiled today, and yet one that few Americans realize is even being fought. David Petraeus, the former director of the CIA and former commander of CENTCOM, recently published a piece in the Washington Post entitled "Anti-Muslim Bigotry Aids Islamist Terrorists." He says that he has become increasingly concerned about inflammatory political discourse that has become far too common both at home and abroad against Muslims and Islam, including proposals from various quarters for blanket discrimination against people on the basis of their religion. But his target isn't just Donald Trump's proposed temporary moratorium on Muslim immigration. It's all speech that some Muslims might find offensive. This has sweeping and ominous implications. Petraeus doesn't just oppose what Trump now characterizes as just a suggestion solely as a policy measure. He's saying that such proposals shouldn't even be made, for just to state them is damaging in itself. Petraeus says the ramifications of such rhetoric could be very harmful and lasting. He says they will compound the already grave terrorist danger to our citizens. How will they do that? Well, you see, Petraeus says, those who flirt with hate speech against Muslims should realize they are playing directly into the hands of Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. The terrorists' explicit hope has been to try to provoke a clash of civilizations, telling Muslims that the United States is at war with them and their religion. When Western politicians propose blanket discrimination against Islam, he says, they bolster the terrorists' propaganda. Now, in saying all this, Petraeus does not offer any alternative suggestions as to how jihad terrorists can be prevented from entering the U.S. He just doesn't like Trump's proposal and what he terms hate speech against Muslims in general, because it will, he says, enrage Muslims and make more of them join the jihad against the U.S. So the upshot of Petraeus' argument is that we must not say things to which Muslims might object, because this will just make more of them become jihadis. His prescription for minimizing the jihad against the West is for the West to practice self-censorship in order to avoid offending Muslims. There has been, of course, a comprehensive effort to compel the West into doing just that, and it's going very well. In the wake of the jihad attack on our free speech event in Garland, Texas last year, there were widespread condemnations of our event for daring to provoke Muslims. After the Danish Mohammed cartoon riots and the massacre of the Charlie Hebdo Mohammed cartoonists, mainstream media outlets all over the West refused to publish the cartoons in solidarity with the victims and in defense of the freedom of speech, instead opting to publish transparently hypocritical explanations of how they were declining to publish the cartoons out of respect for Muslims and Islam. The lesson of all this is that one no less a figure than General Petraeus has imbibed and is now propagating himself. Muslims don't like when we say we should stop Muslim immigration for a while, and they join the jihad, so we must stop saying it so that they won't join the jihad. This argument will only encourage them to tell us they're joining the jihad because of other things we do and say as well. And of course they're already doing that, so that we will stop doing and saying those things also. Petraeus is saying that in the wake of violent intimidation by Muslims, the West's proper response is to give those violent Muslims what they want by conforming our speech to suit them. In reality, this will only encourage more violent intimidation. If we take Petraeus' advice, it will not result in less jihad, as he claims, but in more aggressive Muslim demands, more rage, and more revenge attacks. Petraeus is giving us a recipe for setting the world on fire even more than it is now. Lawrence Summers, who has served as president of Harvard University, secretary of the Treasury, and economic advisor to Barack Obama, recently said a very similar thing in his own Washington Post piece. Summers wrote, "A perception that the United States is at war with Islam, rather than with radical elements within Islam, is an invitation to terrorism." This, of course, echoes numerous similar statements made by Barack Obama and others in the past. But there are several problems with it. One is that the radical elements within Islam are not easily separable from Islam. While Muslim organizations all over the world have issued condemnations of the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and other jihad groups, jihadis and jihad sympathizers still move freely in Muslim communities. Few Muslim organizations have pronounced takfir upon, that is, excommunicated, the followers of Osama bin Laden, Anwar al-Awlaki, Omar Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, etc. Doctrines of warfare against and subjugation of unbelievers can be found among all mainstream Muslim sects. So how does Larry Summers, or Obama, or Petraeus, or anyone else propose to distinguish the radical elements within Islam from the rest, for the purposes of prosecuting this war properly? This is the key question regarding Trump's suggestion of a temporary moratorium on Muslim immigration. None of those who are denouncing him for having come up with it have come up with any alternative plan that's effective to keep jihadis out while admitting Muslims. Also, the idea that, as Summers says, a perception that the United States is at war with Islam rather than with radical elements within Islam is an invitation to terrorism rests upon the assumption that Muslims who otherwise would have been moderate will join jihad terror groups if they don't like U.S. policies regarding Muslim immigration. This places the onus for terrorism upon us, rather than on the jihadis themselves, and suggests that the way we can stop the jihad is to stop doing everything that Muslims dislike. In other words, it's a call for surrender and submission. No thank you, Dr. Summers. No thank you, General Petraeus. I'm Robert Spencer.